Welcome you to our 24th meeting of the Rotary year and our 5,061st of all time. It's wonderful to see you all here today, and thank you to past President Reg for standing in for me for last week. Our guest speaker today is Australia's most published author, Ken Piesse. Ken's going to be speaking on living the dream and will be more fully introduced later by our chair of the day, past President Kevin Sheen. Please join me in acknowledging and welcoming Ken to the meeting. We also have joining us today Charles Nelson, son of past President Adrian. Charles has been working on a video production centred around Rotary Melbourne for his VCE subject, and we'll be watching that very shortly. And we also have Anthony Austin. Anthony is shortly going to be inducted into our club. Would you please acknowledge and make them both welcome? Now, we have a couple of guests today, so if I could please ask the guests to stand when I announce your name and the members who are accompanying them. Chris Watts, a guest of Mary Barry, and Patricia Matushka, guest of Bob Fells. A round of applause to make him welcome. I'd like to now invite Anthony Austin to come forward for induction to the membership of the club. And I'd ask John Saunders to also come up, and John is going to introduce Anthony to us.
President Catherine, members, it gives me great pleasure to introduce for membership of the club my friend Anthony Austin, who holds the position of solicitor and will have the classification of law corporate. His mentor in the club will be Trevor Nink. He will be a member of Toorak 1 group and will be known in the club as Anthony. I have known Anthony for nearly 30 years. Although English, he was born in Ghana, where his father worked for an international oil company. He was educated in England at Stowe School, which you will know is right beside the famous Stowe Corner on Silverstone Motor Circuit. He went to university at Exeter and qualified and practiced as a solicitor in a magic circle firm in England. He then very sensibly married my wife's best friend and shortly thereafter emigrated to Australia, where he has lived for 34 years and is now a naturalised Australian. He has worked in Australia as an in-house solicitor until his recent retirement. Like me, a New Zealander, he thought that by moving to Australia he would get a decent cricket team to support. That is not proving to be the case. Anthony is looking forward to enjoying service through Rotary. Thank you.
We welcome you as a member of the Rotary Club of Melbourne. Today you enter an organisation of more than 1.2 million members in close to 37,000 clubs in 221 countries, embracing the internationality of Rotary. We believe that you have the personal and professional qualities that will ensure the principles of Rotary will be safe in your keeping. The Rotary badge that you will receive in a moment, and I hope you will wear with pride, indicates your commitment to the object of Rotary to which we all aspire, to encourage the ideal of service above self. We expect that you will become an ambassador from us to the community in which you live, and we ask that you convey Rotary's aims to all and all that you do. We look forward to you pursuing with us the great work of Rotary. So with this expectation, I offer you the right hand of fellowship and ask the members to rise and welcome you as a member of our club.
Fellow Rotarians, as my sponsor John mentioned, I have recently retired and therefore find myself with a little more spare time on my hands. As a grateful but not so new immigrant to Australia, I am keen to contribute to the Australian community. Hailing from overseas, I have remained interested in events occurring outside our borders. Rotary strikes me as a terrific organisation through which I can volunteer in relation to impactful projects, both locally and internationally. I am delighted to have been inducted into the Rotary Club of Melbourne, which has such a distinguished record of service. I would like to acknowledge the support and guidance provided by John, Deb and Reg in relation to the application process. I am deeply grateful for their help. I look forward in the years ahead to work to contributing to the club's activities alongside my fellow Rotarians. I also look forward to enjoying fellowship with them as we carry out the important work of the club. Thank you.
Now, Charles, we're up to you. I'd like to introduce Charles Nelson. He's going to talk about his video presentation, just give us a little bit of an overview, and then we're going to watch the presentation that Charles has developed about Rotary Melbourne. So Charles, please, over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. So this year in year 11 at Melbourne Grammar, I was doing a year 12 subject in media, and we were tasked to create a production. So when thinking about what to create, I was sort of thinking about creating a documentary, then sort of looking around and what I could, create it about. And I was sort of chatting with Dad and decided to create it on Rotary Melbourne. Sort of did further research to sort of look at more things that Rotary Melbourne does, and just wanted to create a production about it. So
My name's Catherine Baxter. I've worked in executive roles for quite a few years now. My most recent role has been Chief Operating Officer at Team Global Express.
My name is Mary Barry. I joined Rotary Melbourne about 16 years ago. So my name is Deborah Yinfu. So I joined Rotary because I wanted to give back, do something for charity, and meeting a lot of people with, I guess, their heart in the right place. And yeah, just opening my mind up basically. Yeah. I enjoy, first of all, the friendships of the people I've made over the last 16 years. And you can make lifelong friends in Rotary Melbourne. I enjoy the fact that the motto of Rotary is service above self. And when you join an organisation like Rotary, rather than people saying, what can you do for me? The whole motto is, what can you do for your community? And how do you want to give back to your community?
I think what it allows me as an individual to do is have far more impact than what I could all by myself. So being part of an organisation that, there's 46,000 clubs around the world, 1.4 million Rotarians. When you've got a whole bunch of people aligned, wanting to make a change and make a difference, it's that ability to impact somewhere on the other side of the world that if it was just down to me, I couldn't do it. But because I'm part of Rotary and we are international, we can make that difference.
So it's about service above self. It's about servicing the community. It's about promoting integrity. It's about advancing things like peace and goodwill across the world, and also being involved in local, national and international projects.
So one of the best projects I think I was involved in was Second Bite. So when that first started, I think probably about 15 to 20 years ago now, we were collecting food that wasn't sold at Grand Market. So we got a group of people on roster every weekend, and we would pick up tons of food that otherwise would fall into landfill. So that was a once a month type of thing where we'd go to a Grand Market and go to the various stores and pick up all the food that they haven't sold at the end of the day and pack it up and send it off. So that was a lot of fun.
For the last number of years, I've been involved in a project called Make a House a Home. And how that project works is Rotary Melbourne has a partnership with Launch Housing. Launch Housing provides social housing and low-cost housing to people who require such housing. It could be people who've been homeless, living on the streets. It could be people fleeing domestic violence. And they provide them housing that is affordable. The joy they feel at first of all moving into their own home, but the joy of having brand new items that are theirs. They're not second hand, they're all brand new. And that brings a lot of joy to people living on the street or fleeing domestic violence. And it's stuff they can feel proud of because it's theirs.
Donations in Kind is a fantastic project, again supported by a number of Rotary clubs. And they have a West Footscray warehouse. And again, it's donated items. This time it's not from individuals, it's more companies, hospitals, education institutions. And they're donating things like hospital beds, mobility aids like wheelchairs, crutches, books for students, and donation in kind arranges to move all of these really essential items to locations that need them. Tonga had a volcano disaster that was about 2022 from memory serves. So there were two 40-foot containers full of goods sent over there to help. It was just help set up emergency hospitals and providing assistance. And kids still need to be educated, so getting those goods over there really made a difference.
Rotary International runs an international convention every year, and in 2023 that convention was held here in Melbourne. I was the chair of the host organising committee involved in the setting up and running of the convention. There were 17 people on my team. I was then on the International Convention Committee. I was in that position for 4 years. The last year was a very exciting year in the build up to the convention here, and it was just sheer joy to go past the convention centre on a tram and see the huge poster outside that said Rotary International Convention coming here.
Rotary is at a crossroads, and it's a challenging one. Over the last 5 years, Rotary membership has decreased by 20%. This is a real opportunity for us to actually raise the profile of Rotary and talk more about all the good that's done, and therefore hopefully get more people interested in being involved. I see if we can lift the profile of Rotary Melbourne and Rotary generally, we will actually be able to make sure that we continue to make the huge impact that we have been making and build on the legacy.
I think we'll be a lot more community involved. I think as we have the next generation coming through, they're much more aware of the local communities. That's why the beauty of Rotary is because it's international and local. But I'd like to see involving more young people.
I was asking Charles earlier, did he know what his grade was for that? Well, I think it's A+. Give a round of applause for you. Right, please call Rosemary Nixon to the podium. Rosemary is going to speak to us about women's AFL competition. Rosemary.
With the conclusion of the AFLW grand final, I gather there's some very excited North Melbourne supporters, Peter Rogers. I just want to announce the results of the inaugural AFLW tipping competition. First time we've done this, a small contingent. I'd like to thank Regina Sue and Trevor. But I'd like to announce the winner is Jim Orchard. He's not with us today. He was the winner at the end of the regular home and away games before the finals. Congratulations, Jim. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. And thank you, Rosemary, for your time in putting that friendly competition together. We appreciate it. I just wanted to quickly raise to your attention the annual appeal for Western Chances. The forms and envelopes are on the table. This is for the Christmas appeal. Just you can see the great work that Western Chances has done. It's really important to help with education. It helps not only the individual, but of course our broader society. So please give generously to Western Chances, who we've been partnering with for a number of years. Next Wednesday, can't believe it, is the end of our calendar year of meetings. It's our final meeting. It's a festive event. And we've got music and entertainment provided by David Cram, Karen Kim, and of course our DG Michael Lapina is going to be doing some singing for us as well. So please make sure you book and bring partners along as well. All right, I'd like to now invite Kevin Sheen, past president, to come to the podium and introduce our guest speaker more fully.
Thank you, President Catherine and Rotarians and guests. We're in for a real treat today as we keep the tradition of featuring some of Melbourne's iconic sporting events like the Grand Final, Australian Open Tennis, and of course the Summer of Cricket, which is an outcome of the first test in Perth. The Aussies have been squarely challenged by India. Today we'll hear from a man who was born the year the MCG test wicket was legally watered. If anyone can pick that year, they can win the prize. An author, commentator, Ken Piesse is Australia's most published and highly awarded sports writer with an unequalled energy, expertise and verve for producing quality sporting books. Not a dozen, but it's 89, is that correct? Yes, I had 84. Things have changed since I had that script. On cricket and football, embracing towering legends and unsung heroes. Some with leading cricketers like Max Walker, Terry Jenner, Brad Hodge, and footballers Darren Brereton, Tony Lockett and Jason Dunstall. I can digress and just say to you that Ken did ask me a rather interesting question today when I told him my father was a cricketer and first toured England in 1956 when I was 6 years old. And he has quite a cricket library. And Ken said, "Oh, has he got any of my books?" Now, we came back from Blegarry a bit late yesterday and I had intended to start my old car up, back it out of the garage, get the boxes down from the shelves and do a bit of a stock take, but I didn't. But I'm sure we do. There's plenty of books and I will enjoy going through that when the next stage of my life permits it. But today I've added to it and I hope you do too. And this is Ken's latest book, Living the Dream, which is with drive, ambition and a dash of good luck. And hopefully Ken will tell us more about it. But certainly, whilst he was comprehensively introduced in our bulletin, let me say that we're about to be treated with a lively, anecdote-driven delivery style address from a master storyteller. As I invite Ken to the podium, please join me in giving him a warm Rotary Melbourne welcome.
Hey everybody, lovely to be here. Thanks so much for coming out. Yeah, I like telling stories. I was saying to Catherine, we're about to, at Christmas time, do a P&O cruise to New Zealand, last P&O one before they become Carnival. And I do a Bradman presentation and I do a Warnie one and we have so much fun. So often I start with a Bradman day of golf anecdote where he's playing with Dean Jones. And the Don was maybe late 70s, 79, 80, and he's hitting his 4 irons straight up the middle, chipping with his 7 iron, doing so well. They're playing at Don's club, Kionga. And they're playing match play. Dean Jones is hitting the ball like Tiger Woods, but a little bit awry without having Tiger's length or his accuracy. And Dean actually wins the 17th hole to tie up the match play game. And few could strut like Dean Jones, and he's really strutting. And he's got out the 18th hole is a little par 4, fierce dog leg guarded by a pretty tall eucalyptus tree. And Dean's got out his 4 iron, just about to swing, and Don Bradman interrupts and he said, You know, Sonny, when I was your age, I used to be able to drive the green. Geez, did you, Don? So he immediately threw the 4-iron back in the club, threw his 4-iron back in his gear, got out the driver, and he eyes the eucalyptus tree and the green, and he swings like Tiger Woods, and he hits it right out of the screws, like he said it was going to go 300 yards, and it goes up, and it goes up, just the top of that little eucalyptus tree, hits the top branch, falls in out of bounds. Don gets his 4-iron, hits it straight in the middle, hits a 7-iron on, wins the hole, wins the game. Of course, Sonny, said the Don. That tree, when I was your age, was only this high. True story. So the Don was our royalty, if you like. A little bit like young Charles has just been across to England and Scotland with Melbourne Grammar opening the batting, mind you. And they went to Lords and practiced at the nursery nets. How exciting is that? And they went to the Grange. They went to the Grange ground in Scotland where Bradman played once. And one of my mates was telling me about the local school there. They heard that the 1948 Australians were in town. And of course, Don Bradman, the ultimate sporting hero of the Commonwealth, was captaining Australia and was there. At the Grange, at the school there, 400 boys, and the headmaster was pretty cluey. Around about 10 o'clock, half an hour before recess, he did a public address announcement. He said, "Boys, we hear there's something happening in town today, but I can assure you, any boy caught leaving the grounds early today, instant detention." So at 10:30, the bells rung, all 400 went out. All 400 scarpered and went down to the ground, and they found Don Bradman, who'd only made 15 or 16, out to the local newsagent walking back. They were so disappointed that they actually egged the news agency that particular day. So that was at the old Grange ground. But the Don was royalty, and when any of the touring teams were in town, Don would be trotted out to introduce them. So as the West Indies were in town, Clive Lloyd's team, and they were lined up, Don was shaking their hands, Clive Lloyd introducing them one by one. They came to the very last fella, and he was about my height, about twice as wide, a fast bowler by the name of Patrick Patterson, the fastest bowler in the world. And before Don Bradman even had a chance to say hello to him, "Hey, you are a little guy. I would have knocked your block off." "Well, I don't know about that, Patrick. Like today, you couldn't even get Merv Hughes out," he said. It was true because Dino had made a double century this particular day. This is 88-89. And Merv Hughes had made his highest test score of 73. And so Patrick said to him, Okay, fair enough. Well, how many you average against me, Patrick Patterson, the fastest bowler in the world? And Don Bradman said, well, maybe 56, 57. Only 56? Didn't you average 99? And Don said, well, I am 79 years old, you know. So I like telling stories, and as Kevin very kindly said, Living the Dream is my latest book. It's my autobiography, my memoir. I was working just straight out of high school and had the opportunity to join the Age. And back then, the Age, this is about 1973, it was the high-flying era of the Age, superstars everywhere, and had a chance to get a cadetship, an internship. And Dad picked me up. I was working out at Kensington at the rail yards, lifting big boxes of fruit, putting them into these trucks. And Dad picked me up at lunchtime for the last interview with Mr. Graham Perkin, maybe the greatest Australian journalist that's ever been. He was editor-in-chief of The Age, and I was through the last interview. "What should I say to Mr. Perkin, Dad?" And Dad said, "Well, shake his hand like you really mean it, just like Teddy Whitten, smile, and look him straight in the eye." And I gave him that Teddy Whitten handshake, and I ended up getting the job, one of 7 interns or cadets out of about 400. And so that began my rise, if you like, where you learn all the ropes at the Age. But it was funny, Susan and I already had a kid. We were about to buy a house, and I said to the chief of staff, at that stage I was earning $120 a week. about to buy a house, and I was hoping, been working hard on police rounds at the time to get a little bit more to help us with the mortgage for a start. And so Pat Boyce, the chief of staff at the Age, I went from $120 to $140 a week. I can assure you that wasn't a lot, especially when we already had responsibilities. But that same week there was a phone call, and you'll remember the old Sporting Globe newspaper, the Saturday Night Institution, the pink paper. I became their chief footy and cricket writer, age 22 or 23. And it was just amazing. And the very first day, there was an old fella called Laurie Nash. She was like the Wayne Carey of the 1930s. And Greg Hobbs said to me, "You'll like Laurie. He played Test cricket for Australia and he was a pretty good footballer, as he will probably tell you." I asked Laurie Nash one question, and 2 hours later, he was still talking about himself. He was amazing. He played in the Foreign Legion South Melbourne Premiership back in those days in 1933. Test cricket, he was a star. And I said to him, "Laurie, I've got to get back to the office." Greg passes on his best. And who was the greatest player you've ever seen? "Son," he said, "I look in the mirror every morning when I show up." Got you, young Ken. So along the way, I've been so fortunate. You meet so many terrific people and on and off the field, the champions tend to be champions on and off the field. Like Jack Nicklaus, by this stage, we had 5 kids. Jack Nicklaus was in town and he said, "You got family, Ken?" "Sure have, Mr. I would have called him Jack, I think. "Sure have." And he started asking me about the 5 kids and what they wanted to do and things like that. So I was just amazed that the Golden Bear, the greatest golfer of all time, maybe other than Tiger, would have time to be able to talk to me. That's what sport brings out. It's such a fraternity. And I was telling Kevin, I play in the 6th 11 for Mount Eliza. I'm the leg spinning all-rounder, and I play on Sundays for the Australian Cricket Society as well when we get a turf wicket up. A little bit too wet last weekend. But some of the stories in the book, footy and cricket, always I'd go down to, when I was down in Geelong, I don't know if there's any Geelong fans here, but I'd always go down and see Bobby Davis in Newtown, and then Ian Redpath as well. And he was running an antiques business. And he was so like a champion cricketer, champion bloke, but he was just as happy whittling away, shining up the antique furniture out the back of his shop than talking about himself and all the anecdotes and all the amazing players and places that he had seen. But Bobby was amazing because Margaret, his wife, would always say, "Ask him about the recruiting, Ken." Bobby loved the recruiting. And it's true too, in 1958, he was the All-Australian captain, that goes back a bit, ahead of Barassi, Neil Roberts and Teddy Whitten, some of the superstars, Bobby Skilton, so many great players of the time. Bobby was All-Australian captain ahead of all those. On Sundays, he became coach, and on the Sundays, in those days, the footy clubs only had literally a secretary, and they had the coach, and they'd go out recruiting. They had 2 Form 4s, and it was the Bush Telegraph. If they got a phone call from someone up in Horsham, Bobby would go up and see them in those big Ford LTDs that Geelong used to have with the big Ford factory. And so they're going up to Tooleybuck to see a boy called John Sharrock, who was to run 3rd or 4th in the Brownlow in his first year. And of course, a member of the 63 premiership side that they won. They stopped off at Horsham just for a bite to eat and a cup of tea. And Bob's having a kick to kick with the local hero, the local young star, a little bit about Charles's height. He didn't quite like what he was seeing, wasn't quite sure. But out the back of his vision there was another kid, about 17, quite a big fat kid, who was kicking these huge torpedoes. And Bobby said to him, "Oh, who's that kid out the back?" "Oh, Wade, Doug Wade, his name is, pretty lazy. We don't think he'll amount to much." So by the time Bob could talk underwater with a mouthful of bubbles and marbles, and by the time that 17-year-old Doug Wade had walked around to number 27 McPherson Street, just at the back of the footy ground, bouncing his ball, Bob was already onto his second party pie. And Mrs. Wade said to Bobby, "Would you like to have another cup of tea?" "Don't mind if I do," he said, "don't mind." And Bob started selling Geelong to him. And Doug said, "I'm so flattered, Mr. Davis," he would have called him, only 17. "I'm so flattered, but Jim Cardwell's coming up at the weekend from Melbourne. You'll know Jim Cardwell. He's going to sign me at the weekend." Oh, right, Doug. So you actually haven't signed a Form 4 yet? No, I haven't actually, but it's going to happen at the weekend. Oh, yeah. Well, you know that Melbourne, they've played in 5 of the last 6 grand finals. And if you did go to Melbourne, you might get a game on the reserves bench around about round 18. You know, if you come to Geelong, you're playing full forward in the first game of the year at the cricket ground next year. He could really talk. And so Mr. Wade, Athol Wade, was coming down to Adelaide on a conference from Horsham, went via Geelong, and Bobby signed up young Doug on the spot, gave him a blazer as a signing on fee. And of course, more than 1,000 goals later, Doug Wade is one of the golden greats. I think he was only maybe the first, probably the second guy after Coventry of Collingwood to be able to kick 1,000 goals. Premierships at Geelong, could have almost won in 67, except Freddie Swift took that mark about 4 rows back for the Richmond fans behind the punt road goals. And of course, Doug went to North Melbourne in 75, and along with Barry Davis and a couple of Johnny Rantel, and played on a flag there. Really funny. Ron Barassi is one of my favourites. On the back cover, when I was at the Sporting Club, I trained at North Melbourne, coming off a premiership at Beaumaris. Greg Hobbs said, be a nice little promotion to see how the league footballers train. And Ron grabbed my considerable midriff, and he said, where's your 6-pack, young Ken? I said, it's back at the pub cooling down, Ron. So we're mates for so many years. And Barres was such an amazing personality. He did a forward. There's a guy called Stewie Spencer that played in those first 2 of those Melbourne premierships, went to Tassie, maybe age 20 or 21. He was best in one of the grand finals, maybe 56, and second best in the other. And he walked out on that golden run, and something that he and his wife always regretted, but he went to Tassie to run Green's Transport. But Barres was such an amazing figure, and talk about a mentor. You go and have a cup of coffee with him. He'd come down from his place at the Esplanade there, Fitzroy Street, and he'd signed some books for me. And one of the boys, Peter Dakin, he's involved with Powerhouse, and I got Ron to do a forward for the Powerhouse history. Unfortunately, the author, one of my mates, he needs a good sub-editor. So at the moment, this was 10 years ago, Ron did the forward, but the book still hasn't come out. But it will in time, Peter, I've got no doubt about that. But when you mix with those sorts of guys, like I've been lucky in the media to be able to have some amazing mentors. Ernie Sigley was one. You remember Ernie Sigley, one of the great media performers. And I was listening to, it was on 3AW, might have been the afternoon show, and he interviewed the head man of Creedence Clearwater, John Fogerty, guitar player, singer, one of the rock and roll icons. And this interview, it was so good that 3AW didn't even chop in halfway through with an ad, because Ernie was just in his element. He was bouncing off what John Fogerty had to say, and it just flowed. It was the best interview I've just about heard on radio. And a few months later, we were at Docklands, and Ernie had his daughter there with him, and I came up and congratulated him, and I said, that interview you did with Fogerty a few months back just blew me away. It was so good. And there was this big grin on his face, and he said, Ken, it was easy to do it because I love it so much. I just knew all his background. I would have been able to do the same with Elvis if I ever got the opportunity. And it was such a cue, because saying to Charles with the media stuff, if he really loves that, he's going to be a huge success at it, because whatever you do in life, if you love what you're doing. But Ernie, he was into music and rock and roll. And it was Dennis Lilly was in town doing the 4th of his 6 autobiographies, and I'd always get an interview. I was working with Fox's Inside Cricket and doing the radio for RSN, the old 3UZ as well. And so we did a double-barreled interview, and it was just so amazing with Lilly. I did the minder said you only got 5 minutes. Our interview went 10 because I was bouncing off Lilly, bouncing off him the answers. And Lilly came out and he shook my hand really warmly, like I was a favourite son or a favourite brother. And he said, I just really love that, Ken. Thank you so much. So that was interviewing Lilly the Ernie Sigley way of being able to listen, not just have your 6 questions written out, but actually just bounce. The biggest lesson, though, was from a fellow called Bill Collins, not the film man, but the racing man, Bill Collins. Sunny Side Up, Penthouse Club. You remember him, the consummate media performer he was in radio in the late 50s, TV from the 60s. He was just so amazing. And this was 86, and it was the famous race, the match race of the century, Bone Crusher and our Waverley Star. And Bill called it. And right on the line, he said, and Bone Crusher races into equine immortality. It was such a great line off the top of his head. He said he didn't rehearse it because it was such a great race. And instead of World of Sport, the 11 o'clock Sunday institution, I don't have to sell it to you guys, but every Sunday at 11 o'clock, everybody would tune in and watch Ron Casey or Sandy Roberts if they're presenting. This time, because the race was such a success, the greatest match race of all, they started on Bill Collins, and I'm just standing over here off camera, and they're giving Bill the countdown, 10, 9, 8, and Bill's still puffing away on a cigarette. When it got down to 3, just flicks it over his shoulder, and he gave the best intro, talking about the greatest match race, the greatest horse race he'd ever seen in 35 years of race calling. And would you believe, everybody, we just happen to have Gary Stewart, the Bone Crushers jockey, right here. Gary, what a moment. And again, like Ernie Sigley's interview, it just flowed. And it was the best 6 or 7 minute start World of Sport we've ever had. I looked down later to have a look at Bill's notes. Not even one note. Not one note. And I thought to myself, wow, to be able to have all that up here and to be able to deliver it the way he did. But he was the consummate media performer. So it was just a hint for me that whatever I was wanting to do, love cricket, footy, love footy, just know everything you can about it. Go and talk to everybody you can, because you can make a success of yourself. So I put a lot of the anecdotes along the way, like they weren't all triumphs by any means. I was working at the Age and doing the district cricket. They call it the Premier League now, district cricket averages for Christmas week. And unfortunately, my sports editor had been to the pub. This is a Thursday night. Maybe he had an extra red that he shouldn't have had. And they called me Tolstoy because my stories used to be super long. And so literally, I've done the district cricket top 10 leading batsmen, top 10 leading bowlers, did an introduction, it was probably too long. Lots of copy paper, typing, as I was saying to Charles, heap of copy paper. And Dave, the sports editor, said, "What's this crap, Tolstoy?" And he threw everything up in the air, and all these pink bits of copy paper went all over the shop. Mike Sheehan was working with me, the greatest footballer journalist that's ever been. They knew, like, I was so crestfallen, like I'd worked 3 days on these bloody averages. I think they did get a run, but it might have been the following day. But it just goes to show you that, when you meet people, they don't always like you and they don't always engage with you. But if you try hard enough, you can get there. So when I went to the Sporting Globe, I was doing a cricket magazine too called Cricketer. And on the way back home from town, I drop in at one of my old mates, Leo O'Brien, who was a Melbourne 29er. Kevin, you would have known him really well. And Leo batted for Australia 2 bodyline test matches. And his best mate was Bill Ponsford. And of course, the MCG's Western Standards named after the great Ponny. And this particular year, Ponny was about to turn 80 years old. And I said to Leo, any chance of me being able to talk to your mate? I was thinking that interviewing Bill Ponsford would be like LJ, Laurie Nash. Ask one question, away you'd go. Oh, yeah, of course, I'll try, but gee, I don't think he's very modest, very shy. Oh, yeah, no, he'll be fine. And I rang Jeff Ponsford, the son, and he said, oh, Dad's wouldn't have given a media interview in 25 years. He's very glad that you're interested in his career, Ken, but no, but thank you so much again. About a week later, Susan answered the phone, and it was Jeff Ponsford on the phone on a Friday night. And he said, Dad, we'll see you. Can you come home on Monday night down to Glen Waverley? So I read up all I could about the great Bill Ponsford, how he is the only man, even Bradman didn't make 2 lots of 400 in a game. And I wrote out 5 or 6 questions, typed them up, and I went through these questions. Mr. Ponsford was 79 turning 80, had a polo neck jumper on. We took a picture of him in his stance with Big Bertha, his famous bat. And so everything was going swimmingly until I asked the first question and Bill said, yes. So I went to the second question, no. And the first 6 questions, I only had 6 questions and they were yeses or nos. And I was looking around, I was gone, I was 21 years old. I was gone. I didn't have anything else to ask Mr. Ponsford. But I said to him, Mr. Ponsford, and this was before Warnie had come on the scene, there's nothing here around the house to show what an outstanding sportsman you've been, if not Australia's most outstanding cricketer, certainly Victoria's. What's happened to all your memorabilia? You know, your stumps, your blazers. And he paused. He's, oh, stumps, tomato steaks. He said, young Ken, tomato steaks. And the blazers, they've been keeping the puppies warm for years. And I burst out laughing. This priceless memorabilia just being stashed away in the backyard. And I laughed, and it broke, and he did, and so did Jeff, and it broke the ice. And 2 hours later, here we are, chattering like 2 old married magpies. It was just so lovely. The MCC, to their credit, the Cricket Club, 20 years later, they rebuilt the Western Stand and they renamed it after Bill. Sometimes, whoever's the groovy person at the time, you might make a change, but they named it again. And they had a big unveiling. Barras was there, Billy Ponsford Jr., Jeff Ponsford, some really important people. And young Billy Ponsford, he barreled up to me. He said, Ken, we still remember that lovely interview you did with Dad 20 years ago. You weren't going to get that interview, were you? I said, I've got no idea how it happened because he must have changed his mind, did he? He said, it was Leo O'Brien. He rang Dad every night for about 8 days running until Dad said yes, he would come and see, like a young kid could come and see him. So I got 5 pages in the Cricketer magazine of nostalgia on Bill Ponsford, and he was born 1900. So he was the earliest cricketer I've ever interviewed. The earliest footballer, Wells Ikey, born 1893 at St Kilda. So it's so lovely all the way. If you name an outstanding sportsman, I've interviewed him all along the way. So I've put in those memories into Living the Dream, my book. It could be that you might have 1 or 2 questions. I know time is of the essence, isn't it, Kev?
Well, it certainly is, and we could be here all afternoon and thoroughly enjoying every minute of it. Well, I'll kick it off with a question. Yeah, I said in my intro that we didn't do too well in Perth. What's your prediction for Adelaide?
Well, I was a young kid at the MCG. This is 1967. India were in town, only their second ever tour. And I don't know if any of you were at the MCG that day, but Graham Mackenzie, Garth, known as Garth, was an old comic, and he was really built. Like the girls loved Garth Mackenzie. He took 6 wickets before lunch, 6 for 26. Bumrah's, his first 2 spells, first innings, second innings, they were as electric as Graham Mackenzie that particular day. He was remarkably good. Even Don Bradman at 79 wouldn't have been able to keep him out. He was just terrific. So they were conducive conditions, and they really caught the Australians off guard because he was so good so soon. But the match hardening and what they've done since then, they've really going to regroup, and I've got no doubt that they'll come back hard. They've won 7 from 7 at the Adelaide Oval, Australia, under lights. So it's a Friday afternoon, Friday night pink ball game. I think Stark will be terrific. And if the opening batsman can keep Labuschagne away from Bumrah for, say, 15 or 20 minutes, I think Australia wins.
Well, there we are. Questions, please.
Any other questions from the floor?
Peter.
Yes, Peter.
Ken, well done. You talked about the Sporting Globe. I was talking about brother's celebration of life last week, reflecting on early years at Eagleman. We'd go down Saturday night to get the Sporting Globe.
Yeah.
A few lollies at the
Of course.
How on earth did that Sporting Globe get published? Was it like 6 o'clock or whatever?
Yeah.
To get out in the trucks on Flinders Street, right around Melbourne.
Yeah, we were the same. I'd get it at 7 o'clock at Bay Morris. I'd go up and get Dad's Schweppes dry ginger ale and buy the pink paper as well. It was amazing because my experience at Age Police Rounds, where you had to be able to deliver the story when, how, why, straight away to a copy taker, and you'd ring someone and the copy taker would take down the copy, away you went. So we had a phone person at the Sporting Globe. So in those days it was quarter by quarter. the kicks and marks, and at the end of the little paragraph, you'd have goals. Hudson 5.01. He'd kick one out of bounds. So you always had to save right at the end 3 paragraphs to be able to top the story. And so Fitzroy pulled off the greatest heist of all time by beating Geelong, their first win for 2 years. And Geelong went on to win the premiership this particular year. This was 63. So off the top of your head, you dictate the 3 pars, and then you're finished by around about 4:45. You had to be finished by 4:45. Quickly, the sub-editors would do what they had to do, put the headline on the story, and then literally it was printed and away everywhere. And so you had the Herald, the Melbourne Herald, with final on it. So you had the final race results, and with the Sporting Glove was always the final cricket results, or the final footy results. And you, in the big centre spread up, you had all the district cricket and sub-district. And my cousin Richard used to play for Kew, and I'd see if he's batting in the top 6 and making any runs, these sorts of things. It was just a different era. Like, we didn't have any internet, no mobiles, none of that sort of stuff. But the Globe, it was our lifeline to the weekend sport. And then the Sundays papers, came in as well, and I was able to work with both of them as well.
Yes. Please, Bernie.
G'day, Ken. Bernie McIntosh.
Thanks, Bernie.
89 books is a sensational effort.
Thank you.
But just wondering who your favourite cricket authors might be, local or international, maybe a couple of your favourite cricket books, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, Jack Fingleton, he did a chapter on Ponny that I read before the Ponny interviewed the champion who was colourblind, and Ponny was. And so Fingleton at his best, he was remarkable. There's 2 books, Brightly Fades the Dawn and Masters of Cricket. Those 2 books are amongst the very best cricket books of all time. So they were real superstars, those guys. And at the Centenary Test, all these guys, it was the greatest cricket party of all time. And so I brought along all these books and got them signed, and I still got them to today, including Jack Fingleton's. But just before the Centenary Test, one of our age stringers who had covered district cricket, Ray Heal, his dad was George Heal, who umpired the Bodyline Test matches. George, he was losing his sight, and he wanted the books to go to somebody, all these cricket books, all these Cardises, signed by Neville Cardis books, and these are remarkable. And I had 2 big cases, and I gave him some money for them. And one of the cases had 4 Percy Fender books, an old cricketer from the 1920s, that are rare as. And Percy Fender came to the Centenary Test with his grandson, who was aged 13 or 14, to be his eyes. And Percy was sitting in the delegates' room, and he'd hear the sound of bat on ball. He said, "That's a good shot." And young Jonathan would say, "Oh, that's gone forward a point. They're going to run 3. Yes, it sounds like it." So he knew just from the sound. And Mr. Fender, while he was legally blind, he'd worked out how to sign its tiny little signature, Percy Fender. So he signed each of these 4 books for me. So they're still the most valued books, given the history of mine. So yeah, there's been some great writers over the time. Ray Robinson was superb. There's a young guy coming through right now called Peter Layla, who was at the Australian. He's a fantastic writer. So he's one I'd recommend you Google and have a read of some of his pieces, because he's really, really good. Yeah.
Well, Ken, I think we're just about at the time where someone's going to give me the chop.
Yeah.
But before we do, an ideal Christmas gift for anyone plus put it in your own Santa stocking, and it'll be a great read. I mean, 60 years of cricket and football, there's going to be a lot more stories in there. Ken, it's been an absolute delight, and we thank you very much for firstly being available, and secondly for thoroughly entertaining us with storytelling and memories of old. And it's our customary obligation to give you something that you probably don't get when you are in these occasions. These are a pair of socks. and these are our Rotary socks, and they're made in Preston. They're 200% Australian made as a token of our appreciation. Please join me and thank Ken. Thanks to past presidents Bob Glindeman and Adrian Nelson for their reflection. And I really do want to accolade, Charles. Thank you, Charles. That is a terrific video, a terrific expose on Rotary Melbourne, and I'm sure if we can get the copyright, we're going to make great use of it. You've got a talent, and we wish you well in year 12, which starts soon. In the meantime, have a nice summer. We also want to thank the setup team and anyone who can stay back for a few minutes to help pack up. That'd be appreciated. Next week, as a reminder, President Catherine's advice earlier, next week will be the final luncheon of the year, and it'll feature the festive theme, obviously, at number 35 next door. I hope you'll join us, would you?